The night Elena Cross climbed into the wrong car, she had no idea she was stepping into a world where mercy was currency and blood wrote the rules. She thought the worst thing in her life was the man she married. She was wrong. The worst thing, and maybe the best, was waiting in the back seat of a black sedan with a bullet in his shoulder and eyes that saw straight through every lie she'd ever told herself. What started as a mistake became a choice. And that choice? It changed everything. If you're ready to see how far one wrong turn can take you, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Betchem. The rain came down like punishment. Elena Cross stood under the hospital overhang, her scrub still damp with someone else's blood, her phone clutched in one hand like a lifeline that had already been cut. The screen showed nothing. No missed calls. No texts. Just the time, 11:47 p.m., glowing back at her like an accusation. He was supposed to be here an hour ago. She pressed dial again. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Michael's voice, smooth and rehearsed. "You've reached Michael Cross. Leave a message." She didn't. There was nothing left to say that she hadn't already said 6 times tonight. Around her, the hospital parking lot emptied in waves. Doctors climbed into warm cars. Nurses huddled under shared umbrellas, laughing about something Elena couldn't hear. She watched them go, one by one, until the lot was nearly empty and the cold had worked its way through her jacket and into her bones. She should call a cab. She knew that, but calling a cab meant admitting he'd forgotten her again, meant admitting that saving a 6-year-old's life tonight, compressions until her arms screamed, breath until her lungs burned, meant less to him than whatever he was doing right now. Probably still at the office. Probably still pretending the walls weren't closing in. The wind picked up, driving rain sideways across the pavement. Elena pulled her jacket tighter and stared out at the street, waiting for headlights that weren't coming. That's when she saw it. A black sedan, sleek and expensive, sliding to a stop at the curb 20 feet away. Dark windows. Engine purring low. She squinted through the rain, trying to see the driver, but the glass was too tinted. For a moment she hesitated, then her phone buzzed. A text from Michael, outside. Relief flooded through her, sharp and immediate. He came. He actually came. She didn't let herself think about why it had taken so long or why he hadn't answered her calls. She just grabbed her bag and ran. The rain soaked through her hair in seconds. Her shoes splashed through puddles she didn't bother avoiding. By the time she reached the car, she was breathless, dripping, and so grateful she didn't care. She yanked open the back door and climbed inside. "Thank God you're here. I thought you—" The words died in her throat. The man in the back seat wasn't Michael. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting on his knee, the other pressed against his left shoulder. Even in the dim light, Elena could see the blood. Dark, wet, spreading slowly across the white fabric of his shirt. His face was all sharp angles and cold composure, like someone who'd learned a long time ago not to show pain. He watched her with eyes that didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't react at all to her sudden presence. "Wrong car," he said. His voice was low, steady, almost amused. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She reached for the door handle, panic flooding her system. "I'm sorry, I thought you were—" "Don't." The word wasn't loud, but it stopped her cold. There was something in his tone that didn't allow for argument. Not a threat exactly, just certainty. The kind that came from a man used to being obeyed. Elena froze, hand still on the handle, every instinct screaming at her to run. But she didn't. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not like a threat, but like a problem he was still deciding how to solve. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in years, someone was actually looking at her at all. "You're hurt," she said, because apparently her brain had decided nursing instincts outweighed survival instincts. Observant. He shifted slightly, and she saw him wince. Just a flicker, gone as fast as it came. "You a doctor?" "Nurse. Pediatric." "Close enough." He glanced toward the front seat. "Drive." Elena followed his gaze and realized for the first time that there was someone else in the car. A man behind the wheel, broad-shouldered and silent, watching her in the rearview mirror with the kind of focus that made her skin crawl. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just waited. I need to go, Elena said, turning back to the injured man. My husband is... Your husband isn't coming. The certainty in his voice made her stomach drop. She stared at him, confusion mixing with the fear already pooling in her chest. What are you talking about? He just texted me. No, the man said calmly. He didn't. Before she could respond, he pulled out his phone and handed it to her. The screen showed a text thread, her number at the top. The last message sent 3 minutes ago. Outside. How do you have my... She stopped, looked at him, at the blood, at the way he held himself like a man who didn't ask for permission. Who are you? Someone your husband owes money to. He took the phone back, slipped it into his pocket. And right now, your insurance. The word hung in the air between them, cold and final. Elena's mind raced. Insurance. Debt. Michael. None of it made sense, but all of it felt true in a way that turned her blood to ice. She thought about the late nights, the evasive answers, the way he'd started looking at her like she was one more problem he couldn't solve. I don't understand, she whispered. You will. He nodded toward the driver. Carlo, let's go. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and quiet. Elena watched the hospital disappear behind them, the only life she knew shrinking into the rain and the dark. She should scream, should fight, should do something other than sit here while a stranger with a gunshot wound and her phone number kidnapped her in a sedan that probably cost more than she made in a year. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at the blood seeping through his fingers and said, You need a hospital. No hospitals. You're going to bleed out. Not if you help me. She stared at him. You're insane. Probably. He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation, something almost like curiosity. But you're still here. So what does that make you? Elena didn't have an answer for that. They drove in silence for a while, the city sliding past the windows in streaks of neon and shadow. She tried to orient herself, to figure out where they were going, but nothing looked familiar. The streets got quieter, the buildings got taller. Somewhere along the way, they'd left her neighborhood behind and entered one where the lights were brighter, the cars were newer, and the people didn't exist unless you were supposed to see them. What's your name? He asked suddenly. She hesitated. Giving him her name felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But then again, he already had her phone. Her number. Probably her address, her social security number, and her blood type if he wanted it. Elena. Elena. He said it slowly, like he was testing how it felt. I'm Adrian. Am I supposed to be comforted by that? No. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. But it's polite. You're bleeding all over your car and you're worried about manners? It's not my car. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the sheer unreality of the situation, Elena almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she pressed her fingers against her temple and tried to think. Tried to make sense of a night that had gone from exhausting to surreal in the span of 5 minutes. Why me? She asked finally. If Michael owes you money, why am I here? Because your husband is a coward, Adrian said simply. And cowards don't respond to threats. They respond to consequences. I'm a consequence. You're leverage. The distinction felt important, though Elena couldn't say why. She looked at him again, really looked. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair, darker eyes. The kind of face that belonged on a movie screen or a wanted poster. Expensive suit ruined by blood and rain. And underneath all of it, a stillness that most people spent their whole lives trying to find and never did. How much does he owe you? Enough that he should have been smarter about borrowing it. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now. The car turned down a private road, gates opening automatically as they approached. Beyond them, Elena could see a house. No, not a house. An estate. All stone and glass and money that didn't bother announcing itself because it didn't have to. The kind of place that existed in a different world than hers. A world where people didn't wait in the rain for husbands who forgot them. Carlo parked under a covered entrance. He got out, came around, opened Adrian's door with the kind of efficiency that spoke to years of practice. Adrian stepped out slowly, carefully, his hand still pressed against his shoulder. He looked at Elena through the open door. Come on. It wasn't a request. Elena climbed out of the car, her wet scrubs clinging to her skin, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She followed Adrian through a side entrance, down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than her entire life, into a room that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood both luxury and practicality. A bedroom, king-sized bed, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking ground she couldn't see in the dark, a door on the left that probably led to a bathroom, another on the right that could have been a closet or a panic room or a torture chamber for all she knew. Adrian sat down on the edge of the bed and started unbuttoning his shirt. The movement was stiff, painful. Blood had soaked through the fabric, turning white to crimson in a pattern that made Elena's nursing instincts kick into overdrive despite her better judgment. "You said you'd help," he said, looking up at her. "I said you needed a hospital, and I said no hospitals." He shrugged out of the shirt, revealing a body that was all lean muscle and old scars. The bullet wound in his shoulder was still bleeding, but slower now, through and through by the look of it. Clean entry, clean exit, lucky, if you could call getting shot lucky. Elena stood there, frozen between training and self-preservation. Every part of her that had spent the last 6 years learning to heal people screamed at her to help him. Every part that wanted to survive screamed at her to run. "I could call the police," she said quietly. "You could." Adrian watched her with those unreadable eyes. "But you won't." "You sound pretty sure about that." "I am." He leaned back slightly, grimacing. "Because you're standing here asking yourself why a man like me gets shot and doesn't go to a hospital. And you're smart enough to know that the answer isn't one that involves the police." He was right. She hated that he was right, but he was. Elena took a breath, let it out slowly, and made a choice she'd probably regret. She walked to the bathroom, found a first aid kit under the sink that was better stocked than most hospital supply closets, and came back. She set it on the bed next to him and started pulling out what she needed. "This is going to hurt," she said. "It already hurts. It's going to hurt worse." "Good." He met her eyes. "I'd hate to think you were going easy on me." Elena didn't respond. She just got to work. Her hands moved on autopilot. Gloves first, then antiseptic, gauze, pressure. The wound was clean like she'd thought. No shrapnel, no fragments. Just a bullet that had gone in one side and out the other, missing anything vital by what looked like sheer luck or divine intervention. She irrigated it, packed it, wrapped it. Through it all, Adrian didn't make a sound, didn't flinch, didn't do anything except watch her with an intensity that made her hands shake. "You're good at this," he said when she'd finally finished. "It's my job." "No?" He caught her wrist gently but firmly, stopping her from pulling away. "Your job is taking care of kids. This is different." Elena looked down at his hand on her wrist. She should pull away, should put distance between herself and whatever this was, but she didn't. Instead, she met his eyes and said, "Why did you really bring me here?" "I told you. Leverage. Bullshit." The word surprised both of them. Elena never cursed, never pushed back, never questioned. But something about this man, this situation, this entire impossible night, had stripped away the parts of her that knew how to stay quiet. Adrian smiled. A real smile this time, not the ghost of one. "You want the truth?" "I want something that makes sense. Your husband borrowed money from people he shouldn't have borrowed from. When he couldn't pay it back, he borrowed more to cover the first debt. Then more to cover that one. You see where this is going? He's in over his head. He's drowning, and he's been using you as a life raft without you knowing it." Elena pulled her wrist free, stepped back. "What does that mean?" "It means the only reason he's still breathing is because people think he has something worth keeping him alive for. And that something is you." The words landed like a punch. Elena shook her head, trying to process, trying to understand. "That doesn't make sense. I'm nobody. I'm just—" "A pediatric nurse at St. Catherine's," Adrian interrupted, "with access to patient records, medication logs, and a security clearance that your husband has been very interested in lately." The room tilted. Elena grabbed the edge of the bed to steady herself, her mind racing through the last 6 months. Michael's questions about her work, about protocols, about which doctors prescribed what medications, and how inventory was tracked. She thought he was just trying to show interest, trying to connect. She'd been so stupid. "He wouldn't," she whispered. "He already has." Adrian stood up, moving carefully, and walked to a desk in the corner. He pulled out a folder, brought it back, and handed it to her. Inside were printouts, transaction records, emails, screenshots of conversations she'd never seen but recognized the names in. Her hospital, her floor, her patients, her husband, selling information to people who would use it to steal medication, to forge prescriptions, to put children at risk for profit. No, Elena said, but the word had no weight, no conviction, because looking at the evidence, she knew it was true, had maybe known it for a while and just hadn't wanted to see it. I'm sorry, Adrian said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Elena looked up at him, this stranger who'd dragged her into his world and shown her things she'd spent years avoiding. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're married to. And what am I supposed to do with that information? Whatever you want. He took the folder back, set it aside. But you should know that the people your husband owes money to aren't patient, and they aren't forgiving. Sooner or later, they're going to come collecting. And when they do, they won't care that you didn't know what he was doing. So I'm just collateral damage. Not if you stay here. Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. Stay here. With you. A man I don't know who got shot doing something I probably don't want to know about. Yes. That's insane. Maybe. Adrian moved closer and Elena found herself rooted to the spot, unable to step back even though every instinct told her to. But it's also the safest place you can be right now, because whatever I am, whatever you think I am, I keep my word. And I'm telling you that as long as you're under my protection, no one touches you. Why would you protect me? Because your husband put you in danger, and I don't like watching innocent people pay for someone else's mistakes. There was something in his voice when he said it, something old and raw and true. Elena studied his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the manipulation. But all she saw was a man who meant what he said. How long? She asked. Until it's safe. And when will that be? When your husband's debt is settled, one way or another. Elena closed her eyes, tried to think, tried to find a version of this that made sense, but there wasn't one. There was only the truth. Michael had destroyed their life without her knowing, had put her in danger and then left her standing in the rain. And now this man, this dangerous, complicated, impossible man, was offering her something Michael never had. Safety. Honesty. A choice. She opened her eyes and looked at Adrian, really looked at him. Not as a victim, not as a nurse, but as a woman who'd spent too long fixing other people's messes and ignoring her own. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll stay, for now. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He nodded once, then walked to the door and opened it. A woman stood outside, older, kind-faced, the type who'd probably seen everything and stopped being surprised decades ago. Mrs. Castellano, Adrian said. This is Elena. She'll be staying with us for a while. Get her whatever she needs. Mrs. Castellano looked Elena up and down, taking in the wet scrubs, the exhaustion, the barely concealed panic. Then she smiled, warm and genuine, and said, Come on, dear. Let's get you into something dry. Elena followed her out of the room, glancing back once to see Adrian standing by the window, one hand pressed against his bandaged shoulder, watching her go with an expression she couldn't read. The hallway seemed longer on the way out. Mrs. Castellano led her to another room, smaller than Adrian's, but still nicer than anywhere Elena had ever stayed. There were clothes laid out on the bed, her size. How they'd known, she didn't ask. You've had a rough night, Mrs. Castellano said gently. Elena almost laughed. That's one way to put it. He's a good man, Mr. Varelli. Not always a kind man, but a good one. You'll be safe here. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. The older woman patted her shoulder. Get some rest, dear. Things always look clear in the morning. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Elena stood in the middle of the room, dripping on expensive carpet, and finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the betrayal, the anger at Michael, at herself, at the whole damn world. And underneath it all, something else. Something she didn't want to name. Curiosity. She changed into the clothes, soft pants, a sweater that smelled like cedar, and safety. She climbed into the bed, expecting to lie awake all night, running through escape plans and worst-case scenarios. But the exhaustion caught up with her faster than she expected. Her last thought before sleep took her was of Adrian's eyes, dark and certain and looking at her like she mattered, like she was more than just insurance. When Elena woke, sunlight was streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The rain, the wrong car, the blood, the folder full of evidence that her husband was a criminal. She sat up slowly, her body aching in ways that had nothing to do with the comfortable bed. Her phone was on the nightstand. She picked it up, saw 17 missed calls from Michael, 18 texts, each one more desperate than the last. "Where are you, Elena? Please, I can explain. Just come home. You don't understand what you're doing." The last one had come through 10 minutes ago. "He's dangerous. Whatever he told you is a lie." Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it, deleted all of them, and turned off her phone. There was a knock at the door. She tensed, but it was just Mrs. Castellano carrying a tray with coffee and breakfast that smelled better than anything Elena had eaten in months. "Mr. Varelli would like to see you when you're ready," she said. "No rush." How's his shoulder?" "Sore, but he's had worse." Mrs. Castellano set the tray down. "You did good work, dear. He's impressed." "I'm not trying to impress him." "I know. That's probably why you did." Elena ate slowly, buying time, trying to figure out what she was going to say when she saw him again. "Thank you for kidnapping me. Sorry I patched you up." What's the protocol for morning after conversations with mafia bosses? Finally, she couldn't put it off any longer. She got up, found her way back through the halls she barely remembered from last night, and stopped outside the room where she'd left Adrian. The door was open. He sat at the desk, reading something on his laptop, dressed in fresh clothes that didn't have bullet holes. He looked up when she entered. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I should have." "Good beds will do that." "Is that what we're calling this? Good beds?" He almost smiled. "What would you call it?" "I haven't decided yet." Adrian closed the laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. Elena sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. In the daylight, he looked different. Less like a threat and more like a man who carried threats the way other people carried wallets. "Michael's been calling you," he said. "I know." "You going to call him back?" "No." "Good." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What do you want to know?" Everything, Elena thought. But she started with the most important question. What happens now? Now we wait. For what? For your husband to realize that I'm serious, that his debt isn't going away, that you're not coming home until he makes this right. And if he doesn't, then he's stupider than I thought. Elena looked down at her hands. He won't pay. He doesn't have the money. I know. So this is pointless. You're not pointless. Adrian's voice was firm, cutting through her spiral. You're the only thing keeping him alive right now. As long as you're here, he has a reason to find a solution, to get creative, to do whatever it takes. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as motivation. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up, moved around the desk, and sat on the edge of it, close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to look at him. You want the truth? The whole truth? Yes. Your husband is small time, a middleman who got greedy and thought he could play in a world he doesn't understand. The money he owes me? It's nothing. I could write it off and never notice. But the principle matters. The message matters. If I let him walk away, every two-bit hustler in this city thinks they can do the same. So this is about your reputation. This is about order, about rules, about making sure people understand that actions have consequences. He paused. But you're right. You are bait. And I'm sorry for that. But I'm also the only person standing between you and the people who'd use you for much worse. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she could handle this on her own, that she didn't need protection from a man who'd kidnapped her. But the folder from last night was still fresh in her mind. The evidence, the danger, the reality that Michael had put her in harm's way and never looked back. How long? She asked again. A few days, maybe a week, and then? And then you go home, back to your life, and we never see each other again. It should have been a relief. should have been exactly what she wanted to hear. So why did it feel like a loss? Okay, Elena said. Okay. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Then Adrian stood up, winced slightly. The shoulder was bothering him more than he wanted to show, and walked to the window. You saved a kid's life last night, he said, not looking at her. Elena blinked. How did you? I had Carlo check. Make sure you were who you said you were. And? And you are. Pediatric nurse. 6 years at St. Catherine's. Stellar record. Everyone who works with you says you're the best they've got. He turned to face her. You're a good person, Elena. Better than you should be, considering who you married. The compliment caught her off guard. She didn't know what to do with it. I'm just doing my job. No, you're saving lives. There's a difference. What do you do, Adrian? The question hung between them. He could have lied, could have deflected, but he didn't. I run an organization that operates outside the law. We traffic in things most people prefer not to think about. We solve problems that can't be solved legally, and we protect our own no matter the cost. You're a criminal. Yes. You've killed people. Yes. And you expect me to just, what? Accept that? Accept? No. He moved closer, and Elena's breath caught despite herself. I expect you to survive, whatever it takes, however long it takes. And if that means staying here with me, a man you don't trust, in a world you don't understand, then that's what you do, because the alternative is worse. Do you understand? Elena did. That was the worst part. She understood perfectly. I need to call my work, she said, changing the subject because she couldn't handle the intensity of his gaze anymore. Tell them I'm sick, that I need a few days. Already done. Mrs. Castellano called this morning, said you had a family emergency. You thought of everything. I try to. Elena stood up, suddenly needing space, needing air, needing anything other than this room and this man and this impossible situation. I want to go outside. Not safe. Then take me somewhere that is. Adrian considered her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Get your coat. They ended up in the garden behind the estate. It was massive, all stone pathways and winter bare trees and fountains that looked like they'd been there for centuries. Carlo followed at a distance, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give them the illusion of privacy. Elena walked slowly, breathing in air that didn't smell like rain or hospitals or fear. Adrian walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, his shoulder clearly hurting but his face giving nothing away. How'd you get shot? She asked. Business disagreement. With who? People who disagreed too loudly. Did you kill them? No. But I will if they try again. Elena stopped walking, looked at him. Does that ever bother you, the killing? Adrian met her eyes. Every time. Then why do it? Because the alternative is letting people I care about die. And I've done that before. I won't do it again. There was a story there. Pain, old and deep. Elena wanted to ask, but something in his expression told her not to push. Not yet. They walked in silence for a while longer. Then Elena said, I don't know what I'm doing. That makes two of us. You seem pretty sure of yourself. I'm good at pretending. Elena almost smiled. Almost. What happens if Michael doesn't pay? If he can't pay? Then we find another solution. What kind of solution? Adrian stopped walking, turned to face her fully. The kind where he pays a different way, with information, with access, with something I need more than money. And if he doesn't have anything you need? Everyone has something. What if they don't? Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we cross that bridge when we come to it. It wasn't an answer, but it was all she was going to get. They headed back to the house as the sun started to sink lower in the sky. Elena felt the exhaustion creeping back in. Not physical, but emotional. The kind that came from having your entire life turned upside down in less than 24 hours. Inside, Mrs. Castellano had dinner waiting. Elena sat at a table that could have seated 20 and ate food that tasted like someone actually cared whether she lived or died. Across from her, Adrian ate slowly, methodically, his eyes never quite leaving her face. You're staring, she said. You're interesting. I'm boring. No, you're scared and angry and trying very hard to pretend you're neither. That's not boring. Elena set down her fork. What do you want from me, Adrian? Right now? Nothing. People don't do things for nothing. I'm not people. That's becoming clear. He smiled at that. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and made him look almost human. You're tougher than you think you are, Elena. I'm really not. You're here, aren't you? You could have run last night, could have screamed, could have done a dozen things that would have made this harder for me. But you didn't. You stayed. You helped. You made a choice. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Elena thought about that, about all the choices she'd made. Marrying Michael, staying when she should have left, ignoring the signs because looking at them hurt too much. And now this. Staying in a stranger's house because going home meant facing a truth she wasn't ready for. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. I usually am. That must be exhausting. You have no idea. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. After, Adrian excused himself, business to attend to, people to intimidate, whatever it was that men like him did when they weren't bleeding or philosophizing. Elena went back to her room, showered in a bathroom that had more space than her entire apartment, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. She looked different. Same face, same eyes, same scar on her chin from when she was 7 and fell off a bike. But something had changed, something fundamental. She went to bed early, exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. But before she turned off the light, she picked up her phone, turned it on, watched the messages flood in. Michael, begging and pleading and promising things he'd never deliver. And then she saw the last one, sent an hour ago. I'm sorry, Elena, for everything. But you need to know, he's not protecting you, he's using you. Whatever he told you about me, it's probably true, but that doesn't make him the good guy. Please, come home. We can fix this. Elena read it twice, then she deleted it, turned off her phone again, and closed her eyes. In the dark, she let herself admit what she'd been avoiding all day. She didn't want to go home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the realization that she'd slept through the night without waking once. Elena stared at the ceiling, disoriented by how rested she felt. At home, she woke up 3-4 times a night. Michael's snoring, her own anxiety, the constant low-level dread that had become background noise to her life. Here, in a stranger's house, she'd slept like someone who didn't have anything to worry about. The irony wasn't lost on her. She found Adrian in what looked like an office, surrounded by papers and laptop screens, his jaw tight with concentration. He glanced up when she knocked on the doorframe, and something in his expression softened slightly. "Coffee's in the kitchen," he said. "Mrs. Castellano made breakfast." "You're working already?" "I'm always working." Elena stepped into the room, drawn by curiosity she couldn't quite name. "What do you actually do? Day to day, I mean." Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You really want to know?" "I really want to understand." He considered that for a moment, then gestured to the chair across from his desk. Elena sat, folding her hands in her lap. Adrian closed his laptop and gave her his full attention, something Michael hadn't done in years. "I run businesses, legitimate ones mostly, shipping, real estate, import-export, the kind of things that look good on paper and keep the IRS happy." He paused. "But underneath that, I facilitate transactions that can't happen in the light. I connect people who need things with people who can provide them. I solve problems that the police can't or won't touch. And I make sure that everyone who works for me understands that there are rules, that actions have consequences." "You're talking about crime like it's corporate management." "It is, just with higher stakes and fewer HR complaints." Elena shook her head, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the reality of what he was describing. "And you don't feel guilty?" "At all. I feel guilty every day." Adrian's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "But guilt doesn't change anything. It doesn't feed the people who depend on me. It doesn't protect the families who'd be destroyed if I wasn't here maintaining order. So I do what needs to be done, and I carry the weight of it, and I don't pretend it's noble." "That's bleak. That's honest." Elena looked down at her hands, thinking about Michael's lies. about how he dressed up his crimes in justifications and excuses, never once admitting what he really was. At least Adrian owned it. At least he didn't pretend. "Your husband called again this morning," Adrian said, changing the subject. "From a burner phone. 6 times. I'm not answering." "I know. But you should be aware that he's escalating, getting desperate." Good. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't comment, just watched her with that unreadable expression he seemed to wear like armor. "What?" Elena said defensively. "Nothing, just interesting." "What's interesting?" "Yesterday you were terrified, today you're angry. That's progress." "Maybe I'm both." "Maybe you are." Adrian stood up, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led her through the house, down a hallway she hadn't explored yet, to a room behind a door that looked heavier than the others. Inside was a gym, state-of-the-art equipment, mats, weights, a heavy bag hanging in the corner that showed signs of serious use. "This is where I think," Adrian said, "when the office gets too loud." "By hitting things?" "By working out aggression in ways that don't involve actual people." He walked to a cabinet, pulled out a pair of boxing gloves. "You should try it." "I don't know how to box." "I'll teach you." Elena stared at the gloves. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain some kind of professional distance from this man who'd upended her entire life. But another part, the part that had been slowly waking up since she climbed into that car, wanted to hit something, wanted to feel her body do something other than tend to wounds and swallow anger. "Okay," she said. Adrian helped her into the gloves, his hands efficient and impersonal. Then he positioned her in front of the bag, adjusted her stance, showed her how to make a fist without breaking her thumb. "Don't think," he said, standing behind her. "Just hit it." Elena threw a punch. It landed weak and awkward, barely moving the bag. She tried again, same result. "You're holding back," Adrian said. "I don't want to hurt myself." "You won't. The bag's tougher than you are. Stop being polite to it." Elena threw another punch, putting more weight behind it. The impact jolted up her arm, sharp and clarifying. She hit it again. Harder. Again. The bag swung slightly, and something loosened in her chest. "There it is," Adrian said quietly. She kept going, finding a rhythm. Each punch felt like releasing something she'd been holding too long. Fear, anger, disappointment, all the years of making herself smaller, quieter, easier to deal with. The bag absorbed it all without judgment. By the time she stopped, her arms were shaking and her breath came hard. Sweat stuck her hair to her forehead. She felt raw and exhausted and more alive than she had in months. "Better?" Adrian asked. "Yeah." Elena pulled off the gloves, flexed her hands. "Yeah, actually. Violence isn't the answer to everything, but sometimes it helps clarify the question." They stood there for a moment, both breathing hard, Elena from exertion, Adrian from something else. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his expression shifted into something cold and focused. "I need to take this," he said. "Stay here. Don't go outside." He left, and Elena was alone with the heavy bag and her racing thoughts. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Flushed face, messy hair, eyes that looked sharper than they had yesterday. She barely recognized herself. Maybe that was the point. She found her way back to the kitchen, where Mrs. Castellano was rolling out dough for something that smelled like heaven. The older woman smiled when she saw her. "You look better today, dear." "I feel insane," Elena admitted, "like I should be panicking more than I am." Sometimes the body knows what the mind doesn't want to admit yet. Mrs. Castellano dusted flour off her hands. "That you're exactly where you need to be. In a crime boss's house, hiding from my husband? In a place where someone's actually paying attention to whether you're okay." The observation landed hard. Elena sat down at the counter, watching Mrs. Castellano work. "How long have you worked for Adrian?" 15 years, since he was barely more than a boy, really." "What's he like? Really like, I mean." Mrs. Castellano considered the question carefully. "He's loyal, sometimes to a fault. He takes care of his people, even when they don't deserve it. And he carries more guilt than any person should have to." "Guilt about what?" That's his story to tell, not mine. She slid a plate of pastries across the counter. But I will say this, he's not a man who lets people into his home lightly. The fact that you're here means he sees something in you worth protecting. Or I'm just useful leverage. If that's all you were, you'd be locked in a room somewhere, not eating breakfast in my kitchen and learning to box. Elena picked at the pastry, her mind racing. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to understand it all at once. Just take it one day at a time. Before Elena could respond, Carlo appeared in the doorway. His expression was neutral, but something in his posture put her on edge. Mr. Varelli wants to see you, he said, in his office. Elena followed him back through the house, her heart picking up speed. Something had changed. She could feel it in the air, in the way Carlo moved with more purpose than usual. When she reached the office, Adrian was standing by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenched into a fist. I don't care what he says, Adrian said into the phone, his voice deadly calm. If he tries that again, he's done. Do you understand me? Done. He hung up, took a breath, then turned to face Elena. His expression was controlled, but she could see the anger beneath it. Sit down, he said. Elena sat. What happened? Your husband made a mistake, a big one. What did he do? Adrian moved to the desk, pulled up something on his laptop, then turned the screen toward her. It showed security footage from what looked like a parking garage. She watched Michael approach a car, watched him talk to someone through the window, watched him hand over what looked like a folder. He just sold information about you to the Kozlov organization, Adrian said flatly. Your schedule, your routines, where you live, where you work, everything someone would need to grab you off the street. Elena's blood went cold. Why would he do that? Because Kozlov offered to clear his debt in exchange. Told him they just wanted to talk to you, get leverage on me through you. Michael believed them, or pretended to believe them, which amounts to the same thing. He sold me. The words tasted like ash. He actually sold me. Yes. Elena stared at the frozen image on the screen. Michael's face, caught mid-conversation, looking scared and desperate and willing to do anything to save himself, even sacrifice his wife to men who would do worse than talk. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now Kozlov thinks he knows where you are and how to get to you, which means we need to move. Tonight. Move where? Somewhere safer, somewhere they won't think to look. Elena's mind struggled to process it all. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem was a husband who forgot to pick her up from work. Now that same husband had sold her location to Russian criminals, and she was about to go on the run with a man she'd known for 2 days. I should call the police, she said, but even as she said it, she knew it was pointless. And tell them what? That your husband is involved with organized crime and just committed conspiracy to kidnap? They'll arrest him, sure, but they can't protect you from Kozlov. I can. By running. By being smart. Adrian closed the laptop. I have a place upstate, secure off the grid. We'll stay there until I can deal with this. Deal with it how? However I need to. The implications hung heavy between them. Elena knew what he meant. Knew that dealing with it probably involved violence, maybe death. Definitely things she didn't want to picture. But she also knew he was right. The police couldn't help her. Nobody could, except the dangerous man standing in front of her, offering protection the only way he knew how. When do we leave? She asked. 2 hours. Pack light. Elena stood up, her legs unsteady. She made it to the door before Adrian's voice stopped her. Elena. She turned. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm sorry, he said. You didn't deserve any of this. No, she agreed. I didn't. She went back to her room and stared at the few belongings she had. The clothes Mrs. Castellano had provided, her phone she wasn't using, a life she couldn't return to. She should be crying, should be falling apart. Instead, she felt strangely calm, focused, like she'd finally stopped fighting a current that had been pulling her under for years and just let it take her somewhere new. There was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Adrian, changed into dark clothes, a bag slung over his shoulder. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. They took a different car this time, something nondescript and practical, the kind that wouldn't draw attention. Carlo drove, and another man Elena didn't recognize followed in a second vehicle. Adrian sat in the back with her, his body tense, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Tell me about the place we're going, Elena said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own spiraling thoughts. It's a cabin. Belonged to my father. He used it when he needed to disappear for a while. Your father was in this business too? He built this business. I inherited it. Did you want to? Adrian looked at her, surprised by the question. No, but by the time I realized I had a choice, it was too late to make a different one. That's bleak. You keep saying that. You keep giving me reasons to. He almost smiled. My father died when I was 19, left me with an organization, 100 people who depended on it for survival, and enemies who saw his death as an opportunity. I could have walked away, let it all collapse, but that would have meant watching people I cared about get hurt or killed. So I stepped up, learned fast, made mistakes that cost lives. And here I am, 15 years later, still trying to hold it together. Elena studied his profile in the dim light. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone crueler, I guess. More obviously dangerous. I am dangerous, Elena. Don't mistake control for kindness. I'm not. But I think you're more than just that. Adrian didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. They drove in silence after that, the city giving way to suburbs, then to darker roads lined with trees. Elena watched the landscape change, feeling like she was traveling farther than just miles, like she was leaving behind more than just a place. They arrived at the cabin just before midnight. It was bigger than Elena had expected. Less cabin, more lodge. Hidden in dense woods, surrounded by security measures she could see and probably dozens she couldn't. Carlo and the other man did a sweep of the property while Adrian led Elena inside. The interior was rustic but comfortable. Stone fireplace, leather furniture, windows that looked out on nothing but trees and darkness. Adrian moved through the space with familiarity, checking locks, closing blinds, turning on lights that cast warm shadows across the wooden walls. There are 3 bedrooms upstairs, he said. Take whichever one you want. Carlo and Dimitri will be in the guest house. We're safe here. Elena nodded, exhaustion suddenly hitting her like a wave. How long do we stay? As long as it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She wanted to argue, but didn't have the energy. Instead, she climbed the stairs, found a bedroom that smelled like cedar and old wood, and collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress. Sleep came fast, pulling her under before she could think too much about husbands who betrayed her and criminals who protected her, and the impossible situation she'd somehow ended up in. She woke to the sound of voices downstairs, angry voices. She sat up, disoriented, then crept to the door and opened it slightly. Adrian and Carlo were in the main room, their conversation sharp and tense. I don't care what it costs, Adrian was saying. Find him. I want to know where he is, who he's talking to, and what he's planning next. He's scared, Carlo said, probably halfway to Mexico by now. He's not that smart. He'll stick around, try to fix this. And when he does, I want to know about it. Elena padded downstairs in bare feet, and both men fell silent when they saw her. Carlo excused himself quickly, leaving her alone with Adrian. He looked tired, she realized, the kind of tired that went bone deep. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. I don't sleep much. Why not? Old habit, hard to break. Elena moved closer, studying him in the dim light. The bandage on his shoulder was fresh. He must have changed it while she slept. Let me look at that. It's fine. Let me look at it anyway. He hesitated, then sat down on the couch. Elena carefully peeled back the bandage, checking for signs of infection. The wound was healing well, cleaner than she'd expected. She redressed it with supplies from a first aid kit she found under the sink, her hands steady and sure. You're good at this, Adrian said quietly. You said that already. It's still true. Elena finished and stepped back. Why are you really helping me? And don't say it's about leverage or sending messages. I don't believe that anymore. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost hesitant. 3 years ago, someone I cared about got caught in the crossfire of something that had nothing to do with her. A business associate's wife. She was innocent, scared, trying to do the right thing. I was too focused on the bigger picture to notice how vulnerable she was. By the time I did, it was too late. She died? She disappeared. We found her body 2 weeks later. He looked at Elena, and she saw something raw in his eyes. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Never ignore someone who needed help just because it was inconvenient or complicated. So I remind you of her. No. You remind me of someone who deserves better than what she got. And maybe I can't fix everything I've broken, but I can do this. I can keep you safe. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to reconcile this man, this complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly honest man, with everything she thought she knew about the world. So she just sat down next to him on the couch, leaving space between them, but not as much as she probably should have. Tell me about her, Elena said. The woman who died. Why? Because I think you need to. Adrian leaned back, his eyes distant. Her name was Sophia. She was smart, funny, totally unprepared for the world she married into. Her husband was one of my lieutenants, good man, loyal, but he made enemies. Sophia got caught in the middle. They took her to get to him, to get to me. We tried to negotiate. We tried to find her, but they killed her anyway, just to prove they could. I'm sorry. Everyone's always sorry, but sorry doesn't bring her back. He turned to look at Elena. Her husband blamed me, said I should have seen it coming, should have protected her. He was right. I should have. You can't protect everyone. I can try. They sat in silence after that, the weight of old grief and new circumstances pressing down on them both. Outside, an owl called to the darkness. Inside, Elena felt something shifting in her chest. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. The sense that pain found pain, and sometimes that was enough to build a connection on. I think Michael knew, she said suddenly, about the danger, about what he was getting me into. I think he knew, and he did it anyway because he thought I was too weak to leave him, too dependent, too scared. Were you? Yes. The admission cost her something. But I'm not anymore. What changed? Elena looked at Adrian, really looked at him, at the scars, the exhaustion, the carefully controlled danger that radiated from him even in stillness. You did. This did. All of it. I spent so long being the person everyone needed me to be that I forgot I could be anything else. But here, now, with everything falling apart, I finally feel like I can breathe. That's the adrenaline talking. Maybe, or maybe it's clarity. Adrian studied her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You're not what I expected either. What did you expect? Someone who'd cry more, fight less, need more convincing that staying alive was worth the trouble. I haven't decided if it is yet. Liar. Elena almost smiled. Yeah, okay, liar. They stayed up talking until dawn started filtering through the windows. About Sophia, about Michael, about the choices that had led them both to this moment. Adrian told her things she suspected he'd never told anyone. About the weight of inherited power, about the loneliness of being feared, about the impossible math of trying to be good in a world that punished goodness. Elena told him about the slow erosion of her marriage, the way Michael's neglect had felt like dying by degrees, the relief she felt at finally having permission to be angry instead of understanding. When Mrs. Castellano's replacement, a woman named Anna, arrived with breakfast, they were still sitting on the couch, the conversation finally winding down into comfortable silence. You two should eat, Anna said, setting down a tray. And Mr. Varelli, you should rest. That shoulder needs time to heal. I'm fine. You're stubborn. Anna looked at Elena. Make him rest. I just met him. I don't think he listens to me yet. He will. Anna left, and Elena poured coffee, handed a cup to Adrian. She's very certain about things. She worked for my father. Certainty is her default setting. They ate in silence, both too tired to maintain the intensity of their earlier conversation. Then Adrian stood up, swayed slightly, and caught himself on the arm of the couch. Okay, he admitted. Maybe I should rest. Maybe you should. Will you still be here when I wake up? The question caught Elena off guard. Where else would I go? I don't know, but people run, especially when they realize what they've gotten themselves into. Elena set down her coffee cup and met his eyes. I'm not running. Why not? Because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm standing still instead of being swept along. And I want to see where that takes me. Adrian nodded slowly, something like relief crossing his face. Then he headed upstairs, his movements careful, his exhaustion finally winning. Elena watched him go, then cleared the breakfast dishes and stood at the window, looking out at trees and sky and a future she couldn't predict. Her phone was still off, buried in her bag upstairs. Her marriage was over, even if the paperwork hadn't caught up yet. Her husband had tried to have her kidnapped, and she was hiding in a cabin with a man who killed people for a living and somehow made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her own home. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like waking up. Elena spent the next 3 days learning the rhythm of life in hiding. Anna cooked meals that tasted like home, even though Elena had never been here before. Carlo and Dmitri ran security sweeps every few hours, their movements quiet and efficient. And Adrian worked constantly, phone calls in Russian and Italian, video conferences with people whose faces Elena never saw, long stretches of silence where he stared at his laptop screen with an intensity that made her think he was solving problems she didn't want to understand. She stayed out of his way mostly, read books from the cabin's surprisingly extensive library, worked out in the small gym in the basement until her muscles screamed, tried not to think about Michael or the hospital or the fact that her entire life had been erased in less than a week. On the fourth morning, she woke to shouting downstairs. Elena grabbed a sweatshirt and rushed down to find Adrian standing in the middle of the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his face carved from stone. "I don't care what he's offering," Adrian said, his voice lethal. "The answer is no. Tell Kozlov if he contacts me again about this, I'll take it as a declaration of war." He ended the call and threw the phone onto the couch. It bounced once and landed on the floor. Adrian stared at it like he wanted to put a bullet through it. "What happened?" Elena asked. Adrian's head snapped toward her, and for a second she saw something wild in his eyes. Then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the controlled mask he usually wore. "Kozlov wants a meeting, says he has your husband and he's willing to trade." Elena's heart stopped. "Trade for what?" "For you." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena grabbed the back of the couch to steady herself. "He has Michael?" "Claims to. Could be a lie. Could be leverage. Could be both." "And you said no?" "Of course I said no." Adrian moved closer, his jaw tight. "I'm not handing you over to that psychopath no matter what he's offering. Even if it means Michael dies? Especially if it means Michael dies. He put you in this position. He sold you to save himself. Why would I reward that?" Elena wanted to argue, wanted to say that Michael didn't deserve to die despite everything he'd done. But the words stuck in her throat because she wasn't sure she believed them anymore, wasn't sure she cared. "When did they grab him?" she asked instead. 2 days ago. Kozlov's been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment to play the card." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "He thinks you're leverage against me. Thinks I care enough about you to make a trade." "Don't you?" The question came out before Elena could stop it. Adrian stared at her, and something in the air between them shifted. "That's not the point," he said finally. "Then what is the point?" "The point is that Kozlov doesn't get to dictate terms. The point is that once you start negotiating with terrorists, you never stop. The point is—" He stopped, took a breath. "The point is I'm not letting you walk into a trap." "What if it's not a trap? What if he really will let Michael go?" "He won't." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Adrian's voice was flat, certain. "I've known Viktor Kozlov for 10 years. He doesn't make deals. He makes examples. If we show up to that meeting, you both die. That's the only way this ends in his mind." Elena sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly weak. "So Michael's dead either way?" "Probably." "And you're okay with that?" "No, but I'm less okay with you being dead too." The honesty in his voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Elena looked up at him, this man who'd become something she still didn't have a name for. Not quite friend. Not quite captor. Something in between that felt more real than anything she'd had with Michael in years. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. "We wait. Let Kozlov make his move. And when he does, we respond on our terms, not his. And if Michael's already dead?" Then we deal with that when we know for sure. Before Elena could respond, Carlo burst through the front door, his face grim. We've got movement on the south perimeter. 3 vehicles, maybe more. They're trying to stay out of sight, but the sensors picked them up. Adrian's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The frustration vanished, replaced by cold focus. How far out? 10 minutes, maybe less. Kozlov? Has to be. Nobody else knows about this place. Adrian turned to Elena, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, for her. Get upstairs, he said. Lock yourself in the bathroom. Don't come out until I come get you. What about you? I'll handle this. Adrian, Elena. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She wanted to say no. Wanted to argue that she should stay, should help, should do something other than hide like a child. But the look on his face told her this wasn't a negotiation. Yes, she whispered. Good. Go. Now. Elena ran upstairs, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She locked herself in the bathroom like he'd told her, then stood there in the dark, listening to the sounds of men moving through the cabin below. Footsteps. Sharp voices giving orders, the metallic click of weapons being loaded. Then silence. It stretched out, suffocating, until Elena couldn't take it anymore. She cracked open the bathroom door and crept to the bedroom window. From there, she could see part of the driveway and the woods beyond. 3 black SUVs sat parked in a semicircle, their doors open, their occupants already out and moving toward the cabin. She counted 8 men. Maybe more she couldn't see. All armed, all moving with the kind of coordination that said they'd done this before. And standing in front of them, calm as anything, was Adrian. Carlo and Dmitri flanked him, weapons drawn but not raised. The distance was too great for Elena to hear what was being said, but she could read the body language. Kozlov's men were tense, aggressive. Adrian was still, controlled, every inch of him radiating the kind of danger that made smart people step back. One of Kozlov's men stepped forward, older, gray-haired, expensive suit under a long coat. He gestured at Adrian, then toward the cabin. Adrian shook his head. The man gestured again, more emphatic. Adrian didn't move. The negotiation went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Elena pressed herself against the wall, trying to breathe quietly, trying not to think about how badly this could go. 8 against 3 were terrible odds. Even if Adrian and his men were better trained, better prepared, 8 guns were still 8 guns. Then the gray-haired man pulled out his phone, held it up so Adrian could see the screen. Even from this distance, Elena saw Adrian's posture change, saw something crack in his control. The man was showing him something bad. Elena's stomach dropped. Michael. It had to be. Proof that Kozlov had him, proof of what would happen if Adrian didn't cooperate. Adrian said something. The gray-haired man shook his head, said something back. Adrian's hands curled into fists at his sides, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that he was about to do something reckless. She didn't think, didn't plan. Just unlocked the bathroom, ran downstairs, and threw open the front door. Wait! Every head turned toward her. Carlo swore in Italian. Dmitri moved to intercept her, but she was already past him, already running across the gravel driveway toward the men with guns. Elena, don't... Adrian started, but she cut him off. I'll go, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. If that's what you want, I'll go with you. Just let Michael go first. The gray-haired man smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Elena's skin crawl. How noble, but I'm afraid that's not how this works. Then how does it work? You come with us, now, and maybe your husband lives another day. That's not a deal, Adrian said, his voice tight with barely contained fury. That's a kidnapping. Call it what you want. The man's smile widened. But the lady seems willing. Who are we to stop her? Adrian moved between Elena and the man so fast she barely saw it. She's not going anywhere with you. That's not your choice. It's mine. Elena stepped around Adrian, forced herself to look at the gray-haired man. Show me proof Michael's alive. Let me see him. Then I'll go. The man considered her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone again, tapped something, and held it out. Elena stepped closer, her pulse pounding in her ears. The screen showed a video. Michael, bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. His face was bruised, his lips split, his eyes wild with fear. Someone off camera said something in Russian. Michael flinched. Satisfied? The gray-haired man asked. Elena felt nothing. Looking at her husband, beaten, terrified, pathetic, she felt absolutely nothing. No love, no pity, no anger. Just a vast, empty space where those feelings used to live. Yeah, she said quietly. I'm satisfied. She started to move forward. Adrian grabbed her arm. Don't do this, he said, his voice low, urgent. Please. I have to. No, you don't. We can find another way. There is no other way. You know that. Elena looked up at him, memorizing his face. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me. For making me feel like I mattered. You do matter. Don't you understand that? The gunshot cut through the air like thunder. Everyone dropped. Elena hit the gravel hard, Adrian's body covering hers before she could process what was happening. More shots, rapid, precise, coming from the tree line to the east. Kozlov's men scattered, returning fire, shouting in Russian and English. Stay down, Adrian yelled, half dragging Elena behind one of the SUVs. What's happening? Reinforcements. Mine. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, then looked at her with fierce intensity. When I say run, you run. Straight back to the cabin. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me. Understand? Adrian, do you understand? Yes. Good. He kissed her forehead. Quick, hard, desperate, then shoved her toward the cabin. Run! Elena ran. Behind her, the gunfire intensified. She didn't look back. Didn't let herself think about Adrian or Carlo or Dmitri or any of the men shooting at each other in the driveway. Just focused on moving, on breathing, on getting to safety. She made it to the cabin, slammed the door, turned the locks. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the deadbolt. Outside, the battle raged. Shouts, gunfire, the screech of tires on gravel, then an explosion that rattled the windows and made her ears ring. Elena crouched behind the couch, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest, and waited. The shooting went on for what felt like forever. Then it started to slow, fewer shots, longer pauses between them. Finally, silence. Elena stayed frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Then footsteps on the porch, someone trying the door handle. Elena. Adrian's voice rough and strained. It's me. Open up. She stumbled to the door, hands shaking, and fumbled with the locks. When she finally got it open, Adrian was standing there covered in blood. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. Are you hurt? She asked, already reaching for him, checking for wounds. I'm fine. Most of this isn't mine. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. Carlo took a hit to the leg. Dimitri's with him. We got 5 of them. The rest ran. The gray-haired man? Dead. Tried to shoot at you through the window. Bad decision. Elena processed that. A man had died because he'd tried to kill her. Adrian had killed him, and she felt nothing about that either. What was wrong with her? What about Michael? She asked. Unknown. But Kozlov knows where we are now. This place is compromised. We need to move. Tonight. Move where? Back to the city, to the estate. It's more defensible. And if Kozlov wants a war, I'd rather fight it on my own ground. Elena nodded, numb with shock and adrenaline. Okay, just tell me what to do. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, something complicated crossing his face. Why did you come out there? When I told you to stay inside? Because you were going to do something stupid to protect me. I could see it. And you running out into the middle of a standoff wasn't stupid? Probably. But you would have done it for me. That's different. Why? Because you're the only one allowed to make sacrifices? Adrian didn't answer, just pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and held on like she might disappear if he let go. Elena pressed her face against his chest, felt his heart hammering against her cheek, and let herself take this moment. This one moment where they were both alive and together and everything else could wait. We should go, Adrian said finally, pulling back. I know. They packed quickly. Elena threw her few belongings into a bag while Adrian coordinated with his people over the phone. 20 minutes later, they were in a different car, armored this time, with Dmitri driving and Carlo in the passenger seat, his leg bandaged but functional. The drive back to the city was tense and silent. Elena kept waiting for another attack, Another ambush, another explosion. But they made it to the estate without incident, pulling through the gates just as dawn started to break. Inside, the house was a hive of activity. Men Elena had never seen before moved through the halls with weapons and radios. Mrs. Castellano stood in the kitchen directing people with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this before. The whole place had transformed from a home into a fortress. "Your room's ready," Mrs. Castellano said when she saw Elena. "Fresh clothes, everything you need. Get some rest while you can, dear. It's going to be a long few days." Elena wanted to argue that she wasn't tired, but her body disagreed. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving her hollowed out and shaking. She went upstairs, showered off the gravel dust and fear, and collapsed into bed still damp. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices arguing. Elena checked her phone. She'd slept for 12 hours. Downstairs, Adrian and Carlo were in the study, their conversation heated. "We can't just sit here and wait for him to make another move," Carlo was saying. "I'm not sitting. I'm planning." "Planning what?" "We don't even know where he's keeping Cross." "We will. I've got people working on it." "And when we find him, what then?" "Then we end this." Elena knocked on the doorframe. Both men looked up, and Carlo excused himself quickly, leaving her alone with Adrian. He looked exhausted, she realized. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. The bandage on his shoulder had fresh blood seeping through. "You're bleeding again," Elena said. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Sit down." Adrian started to argue, then thought better of it. He sat. Elena got the first aid kit from the bathroom and carefully changed his bandage. The wound looked angry, inflamed, probably from the fight earlier. "You need antibiotics," she said. "I know. Anna's picking some up. And rest, real rest, not whatever you've been doing. I'll rest when this is over." "Adrian, I know what I'm doing, Elena." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're running yourself into the ground." "Maybe, but it's my ground to run into." Elena finished with the bandage and sat back. "What happens now, really?" "Now we find Michael, and then we find Kozlov, and then we settle this." "How?" Adrian met her eyes. "However I have to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Elena wanted to push, wanted to demand a real plan, a timeline, some kind of promise that this would all work out. But she knew better. Knew that in Adrian's world, promises were expensive and plans fell apart the moment they met reality. "There's something else," Adrian said, his voice careful. "Something you need to know." "What?" "We intercepted some communications. Kozlov's people talking to each other. And it looks like your husband wasn't just selling information about you." Elena's stomach tightened. What else was he selling? Patient records. Specific ones. Kids with expensive medications, rare conditions. The kind of information that someone could use to target families for extortion or worse. The room tilted. Elena gripped the arm of the couch, trying to breathe through the nausea rising in her throat. "How many?" "At least 20 files, maybe more. 20 children, 20 families. All put at risk because Michael needed money and didn't care who got hurt." Elena thought about the kids she'd treated over the years, the 6-year-old she'd saved the night this all started, the little girl with leukemia who always asked for the purple popsicles, the boy with cystic fibrosis who wanted to be an astronaut. Any of them could have been in those files. Any of them could have been targets. "I'm going to be sick," Elena whispered. Adrian was there immediately, helping her to the bathroom, holding her hair back while she threw up everything in her stomach. When she was done, he handed her a towel and sat on the floor next to her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know that's not enough, but I am." "It's not your fault. It's not yours either. Isn't it?" Elena leaned back against the wall, exhausted. "I married him. I should have seen what he was. Should have known. People are good at hiding what they don't want seen. You're not psychic. No, just stupid. Stop." Adrian's voice was firm. "You're not stupid. You're human. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a character flaw. That's just life." Elena looked at him, this impossible man who'd somehow become the most honest person in her life. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because someone should be." The simplicity of the answer broke something in her. Elena started crying. Not soft, pretty tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Adrian pulled her close and let her fall apart, his arms steady around her, his voice low and comforting even though she couldn't make out the words. When she finally stopped, her eyes were swollen, and her throat was raw, and she felt hollowed out, but also lighter, somehow. Like crying had purged something toxic she'd been carrying too long. Better? Adrian asked. Not even a little bit, but thank you. They sat there for a while longer, just breathing. Then Adrian's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression going cold and focused. When? He asked. Pause. Are you sure? Another pause. Good. Send me the location. We move in 1 hour. He hung up and looked at Elena. We found him. Michael. Kozlov's holding him in a warehouse near the port. Are you going to get him? Yes. Why? After everything he's done? Because I need Kozlov to think I'm playing by his rules, and because Michael knows things that might help us end this faster. Elena processed that. And after you get him, what happens to him then? Adrian stood up, offered her his hand. That depends on what he tells us, and what you want. What I want? It's your life he ruined, your patience he endangered. You get a say in what happens to him. The power of that statement landed hard. Elena took Adrian's hand and let him pull her up. I don't know what I want. That's okay. You've got time to figure it out. An hour later, Elena watched from the study window as Adrian, Carlo, Dmitri, and 6 other men she didn't know piled into 3 vehicles and drove away. Mrs. Castellano stood next to her, silent and solid. He'll be okay, the older woman said. You don't know that. I've seen Mr. Varelli survive worse than Viktor Kozlov. He'll come back. And if he doesn't? Mrs. Castellano patted her hand. Then we deal with that when it happens. But I wouldn't bet against him if I were you. Elena wanted to believe her, wanted to have that kind of faith, but all she could think about was Adrian walking into danger because of her husband's mistakes. Because of choices she'd made years ago that had led to this moment. She went back to her room and tried to read. Tried to sleep. Tried to do anything other than watch the clock and imagine everything that could go wrong. When headlights finally swept across the driveway 3 hours later, she was downstairs before Mrs. Castellano could tell her to stay put. The front door opened. Adrian walked in first, blood on his face but moving under his own power. Behind him, Carlo and Dmitri dragged someone between them, a man with a hood over his head, hands zip-tied behind his back. Take him to the basement, Adrian said. Make sure he's secure. I'll be down in 10 minutes. The men disappeared down a hallway. Adrian turned to Elena, and she saw exhaustion and something else in his eyes. Satisfaction. He'd won this round. Is that? Elena started. Yeah, that's Michael. She stared at the hallway where they'd taken him. Her husband. The man she'd promised to love forever. Now a prisoner in a stranger's house because he'd destroyed everything they'd built together. Do you want to see him? Adrian asked. Elena thought about it, really thought about it. Then she shook her head. Not yet. I'm not ready. Okay, when you are, let me know. Adrian started toward the stairs, moving slowly, clearly hurting. Elena followed him, caught his arm. Thank you, she said, for going after him, for bringing him back. Don't thank me yet. You haven't heard what he has to say. I don't care what he has to say. Thank you. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded and continued upstairs. Elena watched him go, her heart doing complicated things in her chest that she didn't have names for. Downstairs in the basement she'd never seen, Michael Cross sat hooded and bound to a chair, probably realizing for the first time that his decisions had consequences, that his wife wasn't coming to save him, that the only person who could help him now was the man he'd tried to sell her to. Elena went back to her room and waited for morning, for clarity, for whatever came next. Elena didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing that 1 floor below her sat the man she'd spent 6 years of her life with, the man who'd promised to protect her and then sold her to the highest bidder. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that video, Michael tied to a chair, beaten and terrified. And every time, she felt nothing. That was the part that scared her most. Not the danger. Not the violence. Not even the uncertainty of what came next. It was the vast, empty space where her feelings for Michael used to be. like he'd been surgically removed from her heart, leaving nothing behind but scar tissue. When dawn finally broke, Elena gave up on sleep. She showered, dressed, and went downstairs to find Adrian already in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, his eyes searching her face. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks. You're not exactly fresh yourself." He almost smiled. "Fair point. Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup, black the way she'd started taking it since coming here. No cream, no sugar, just bitter and strong and honest. She sat across from him at the kitchen island and wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Did you talk to him?" she asked. "Not yet. Wanted to wait until you were ready." "I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "That's okay too. You don't have to see him if you don't want to." Elena sipped her coffee, considering. "What will you do with him? After you get what you need?" Adrian set down his tablet. "That depends on what he tells us. And like I said, what you want." "Stop putting this on me. I can't decide someone's fate." "Why not? He decided yours without asking." The logic was brutal and irrefutable. Elena looked down at her coffee, watching steam rise and dissipate. "What are my options? Honestly, we can let him go. Disappear him somewhere Kozlov won't find him. Or," Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully, "or we can make sure he faces consequences for what he's done. Real ones." "You mean kill him?" "I mean make sure he can never hurt anyone again, however that needs to happen." Elena's stomach twisted. She should be horrified, should reject the idea immediately. But instead she found herself thinking about those 20 patient files, about families who had no idea their children were at risk, about the 6-year-old she'd saved who might have been one of Michael's victims. "I need to see him," she said quietly. "Are you sure?" "No, but I need to do it anyway." Adrian stood up, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "Okay, give me 10 minutes to make sure he's presentable. Then I'll take you down." He left, and Elena sat alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding. Mrs. Castellano appeared from somewhere, silent as always, and set a plate of toast in front of her. "Eat," the older woman said. "You'll need your strength." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Elena picked at the toast, forcing down bites that tasted like sawdust. By the time Adrian came back, she'd managed to eat half a slice and felt marginally less like she might pass out. "Ready?" he asked. "No, let's go." He led her through this house to a door she'd never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf in the study. Behind it, stairs descended into darkness. Adrian flipped a switch, and lights flickered on, revealing a finished basement that looked more like an interrogation room than storage space. Concrete floors, reinforced walls, a metal chair bolted to the ground. Michael sat in that chair, his hands still zip-tied, though the hood was gone now. His face was worse than she'd seen in the video. One eye swollen shut, his lips split and crusted with dried blood, bruises blooming across his jaw and cheekbones. He looked up when they entered, and something like relief flooded his battered features. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank God. I knew you'd come. Tell them this is all a mistake, that I was trying to protect you." Elena stared at him, waited for something to rise up, anger, pity, love, anything. But there was still nothing, just that empty space where feelings used to live. "Protect me," she repeated flatly. "Yes. Everything I did was to keep you safe. You have to believe me." Adrian moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and grounding. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes." Michael's gaze darted between them, and something ugly twisted in his expression. "Are you kidding me? You're with him now?" "Elena, he's a criminal, a killer. Whatever he's told you is a lie." "Actually," Elena said, her voice steady, "he's told me the truth. About you. About the money you borrowed. About the information you sold. About the children you put at risk. That's not... I didn't... Just stop." The word came out sharp, cutting through his protests. "I've seen the evidence, the transaction records, the patient files. I know what you did, Michael, so don't stand there and lie to me." Michael's face crumpled. "I didn't have a choice. They were going to kill me. What was I supposed to do?" "Not sell your wife to Russian gangsters would have been a start," Adrian said coldly. "I thought... They said they just wanted to talk to her, to use her as leverage. I thought if I cooperated, they'd let me pay back the debt over time." "You thought they'd negotiate with you after you gave them what they wanted?" Adrian shook his head. You really are stupid. Fuck you. You don't know what it's like. The pressure, the debt piling up. Everywhere I turned, someone wanted money I didn't have. So you stole from children, Elena said. You sold information about sick kids to criminals. I didn't know what they'd use it for. I swear, Elena, I just needed cash. They offered me $5,000 per file. I didn't think. You didn't think. Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. That's the problem, Michael. You never think. Not about consequences, not about other people, not about anything except yourself. That's not fair. Fair? Elena stepped closer, and Michael flinched. You want to talk about fair? How about the 6-year-old whose mother might have been extorted because you sold her medical records? How about the families who trusted us, trusted me, to keep their information safe? How about your wife, who you left standing in the rain while you ran away from your own mistakes? I'm sorry. Michael was crying now, tears mixing with blood on his bruised face. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I got in over my head, and I panicked, and I made bad choices. But I love you, Elena. You have to know that. I love you. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. At the man she'd married in a courthouse on a Tuesday because they couldn't afford a real wedding. The man who'd promised to build a life with her, to be her partner, to stand beside her through everything. The man who'd become a stranger so gradually she hadn't noticed until it was too late. No, you don't, she said quietly. You love the idea of me, the safety I represent, the stability. But you don't love me. Because if you did, you never would have done this. That's not true. It is true. And you know what? I don't love you either. I haven't for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Michael stared at her like she'd struck him. Adrian remained silent, his presence steady beside her. So what now? Michael asked, his voice breaking. You're just going to leave me here? Let him kill me? I haven't decided yet. Elena, please, I'm begging you. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I don't deserve to die for them. Don't you? Elena tilted her head, studying him. Those children you put at risk. If something happens to them because of what you did, isn't that on you? Doesn't that make you responsible for whatever comes next? I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't hurt anyone directly. You set the gun on the table and walked away. That's not innocence. That's cowardice. Michael's face twisted with desperation. What do you want from me? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Anything. Just don't let him kill me. Elena looked at Adrian. What do you need from him? Names, contacts, everyone he dealt with on Kozlov's side, every transaction, every meeting, every piece of information he sold. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. And if he tells you everything, what then? Then we use it to end Kozlov, cut off his operation at the knees, make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Elena turned back to Michael. You heard him. Talk. And if I do, you'll let me go? I'll consider it. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even close. But Michael grabbed onto it like a drowning man grabbing a rope. For the next 2 hours, he talked. Names spilled out, contact points, money drops, encrypted email addresses. He described meetings in parking garages and wire transfers through shell corporations. He detailed every file he'd sold, every piece of information he'd given up, every line he'd crossed trying to keep himself afloat. Adrian recorded it all on his phone, his expression unreadable. Elena stood against the wall and listened to her husband confess to crimes she'd never imagined him capable of. Not because he was brave or principled, but because fear had finally stripped away every last shred of the mask he'd been wearing. When Michael finally ran out of information, his voice was hoarse, and his remaining good eye was glazed with exhaustion. Adrian stopped the recording and pocketed his phone. That everything? He asked. Yes, I swear. That's all of it. Adrian looked at Elena. Your call. Elena pushed off the wall and walked to stand directly in front of Michael. He looked up at her with something like hope, and she hated him for it. Hated that even now, after everything, he still thought she might save him. You asked what I want, she said. You want to know if I'm going to let you walk out of here? Yes, please. Here's what I want. I want those families to be safe. I want every single child whose file you sold to be protected from whatever consequences might come. I want you to undo every bit of damage you've caused. I can't. Elena, I can't fix it. It's too late. I know. That's the problem. Elena crouched down so she was eye level with him. You destroyed lives, Michael. Maybe not directly, maybe not with your own hands, but you lit the fuse and walked away. And now you want me to forgive you? To tell you it's okay? That you deserve a second chance? You don't. You don't deserve forgiveness. You don't deserve my pity. And you sure as hell don't deserve to walk away from this like it never happened. Michael's face crumpled again. So that's it? You're going to let him kill me? Elena stood up, looked at Adrian. No, I'm not going to let him kill you, but I'm not going to save you either. What does that mean? It means you made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences, or not. I don't really care anymore. She walked toward the stairs, her legs somehow steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Adrian followed, pausing only to say something to Michael in Italian, low and cold and final. Whatever it was made Michael's remaining color drain from his face. Upstairs, Elena walked straight through the house and out into the garden. The morning air was cold and clean, and she sucked it in like she'd been suffocating. Adrian joined her a moment later, silent and patient. What did you say to him? Elena asked. In Italian. I told him that if anyone gets hurt because of the information he sold, I'll find him, no matter where he runs, no matter how long it takes, and I'll make sure his death is slow enough that he has time to regret every decision he made. You're letting him go? I'm letting him think I'm letting him go. But he'll have a tracker implanted before he leaves, and people watching him. If he tries to run to Kozlov, we'll know. If he tries to disappear, we'll know. He's useful alive. For now. Elena nodded, processing that. And the families, the children? I'll have my people reach out to the hospital. Anonymous tip about a security breach. They'll lock down the files, notify the families. It won't undo what Michael did, but it'll minimize the damage. That's not enough. No, but it's what we can do. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Elena felt hollowed out, wrung dry of every emotion except exhaustion. I meant what I said down there, she said finally. I don't love him. I don't think I have for years. That's not your fault. Isn't it? I stayed. I kept trying. I convinced myself it would get better if I just loved him enough. Love doesn't work like that. It's not something you can force or manufacture. Either it's there or it's not. Elena looked at Adrian, this complicated, dangerous man who'd somehow become the most honest presence in her life. Is it there? For you? What? Love? Do you love anyone? Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, I loved Sophia, the woman I told you about. And when she died, I decided it was easier not to love anyone. Safer, less complicated. And now? Now I'm not so sure. The admission hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Elena wanted to push to ask what he meant, but something in his expression stopped her. This wasn't the time. Not yet. What happens next? She asked instead. With Kozlov? Now we go to war. For real this time. Adrian's jaw tightened. Michael gave us enough to hit 3 of Kozlov's operations simultaneously. Money laundering fronts, drug shipments, weapon caches. If we move fast, we can cripple his organization before he has time to respond. And then? And then he'll come after me directly, which is what I want. Better a fight on my terms than waiting for him to make the next move. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using leverage. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Adrian turned to face her fully. Elena, I need you to understand something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Kozlov won't stop until one of us is dead. And when he makes his move, it's going to be brutal, loud, probably here at the estate. You want me to leave? I want you safe. And you think I'll be safer somewhere else? Away from you and your people? Away from the only protection I have? I think you'll be safer not being in the middle of a war zone. Elena stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. I'm already in the middle of it. Michael made sure of that. And honestly, I'd rather be here, where I know what's happening, than hiding somewhere wondering if you're alive or dead. That's not smart. Probably not, but it's what I want. But Adrian studied her face, searching for something. Doubt, maybe. Fear. Whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but you follow my rules. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. No arguments, no heroics. Understood? Understood. Good. He touched her face, just briefly, his hand rough and warm against her cheek. I don't want anything to happen to you. I don't want anything to happen to you either. I'm harder to kill than I look. You better be. They went back inside to find the house transformed into a command center. Maps spread across the dining room table, laptops open on every surface. Men in suits and tactical gear moving through rooms with the precision of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Carlo was at the table, his injured leg propped up, barking orders into a phone. Dmitri stood by the window with a rifle, watching the grounds. Adrian jumped into it immediately, his exhaustion forgotten as he coordinated with his people. Elena watched him work, saw the way everyone deferred to him, the way his presence changed the energy in the room. This was his element, his purpose, the weight he'd been born to carry. She made herself useful where she could, brought coffee, made sandwiches that probably no one would eat but at least gave her something to do with her hands. Stayed out of the way when conversations turned to weapons and tactics and things she didn't understand. Hours passed. The sun arced across the sky, and slowly the pieces fell into place. 3 teams were assembled. 3 targets identified, timing coordinated down to the minute. We move at midnight, Adrian announced. Hit all 3 locations simultaneously. Fast, clean, out before Kozlov's people can call for backup. Questions? There were none. Everyone knew their roles. Everyone understood the stakes. Elena pulled Adrian aside as his people dispersed to prepare. What about me? What do I do? You stay here with Mrs. Castellano. The estate's secure. You'll be safe. Safe and useless. Safe and alive. That's what matters. Adrian, Elena, please. Caught her hands, held them tight. I need to know you're okay. If I'm out there worrying about you, I'll make mistakes, and mistakes get people killed. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, could do something. But she saw the fear beneath his control, the way his hands trembled slightly as they held hers. This mattered to him. She mattered to him. Okay, she said. I'll stay. But you come back. You hear me? You come back. I'll do my best. That's not good enough. Promise me. Adrian pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it. In a war, promises were just words. But Elena held on to it anyway, wrapped it around herself like armor. At 11:30, Adrian and his teams left. Elena watched from the window as 3 vehicles rolled through the gates and disappeared into the night. Mrs. Castellano came to stand beside her, solid and comforting. He's good at what he does, the older woman said. He'll be fine. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. Elena wanted to believe her, wanted to have faith that this would work, that Adrian would come back, that tomorrow would arrive with everyone she cared about still breathing. But faith was a luxury she'd lost somewhere along the way. So instead, she waited. The house felt too quiet without Adrian and his people filling it with purpose and noise. Elena tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to do anything except stare at the clock and count the minutes. 1 hour passed. Then 2. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Moving to Phase 2. Elena stared at it, trying to decode what that meant. Adrian was alive. That was what mattered. The rest, Phase 1, Phase 2, whatever was happening out there, she'd learn about when it was over. Another hour, another text. Phase 2 complete. Complications. Coming home. Complications. Elena's heart clenched. That could mean anything. Injuries. Deaths. Setbacks. She paced the living room, unable to sit still, while Mrs. Castellano made tea that neither of them drank. Finally, just before dawn, headlights swept across the driveway. Elena was at the door before the vehicles stopped. Adrian climbed out of the first one, moving stiffly but upright, blood on his shirt but not enough to be his. Behind him, Carlo and Dmitri and the others, all accounted for, all breathing. Elena didn't think, just ran to him, threw her arms around him and held on tight. Adrian caught her, stumbled slightly from her momentum, then held her back just as fiercely. You're okay, she said against his chest. You're okay? I'm okay. What happened? The text said complications. Kozlov had more people at the third location than we expected. We got what we needed, but it got messy. Lost the element of surprise. Anyone hurt? Minor injuries. Nothing serious. But Kozlov knows we're coming now. The next move is his. Adrian pulled back, looked at her face. You should get some sleep. It's been a long night. So should you. I will. Soon. I just need to debrief with... The explosion cut him off. Massive, deafening, somewhere close. The ground shook. Windows shattered. Elena hit the pavement hard, Adrian covering her body with his own. Around them, his men were shouting, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. The West Wall, someone yelled. They blew the West Wall. Gunfire erupted immediately. Not random shots, but coordinated, professional, coming from multiple directions. Kozlov's people were here. In the compound, the war had come to them. Adrian hauled Elena to her feet. Inside, now! Get to the safe room! Where... Mrs. Castellano knows. Go! Elena ran, her ears still ringing from the explosion. Behind her, Adrian was shouting orders, organizing defense, becoming the general his people needed. She found Mrs. Castellano in the entry hall, calm as ever, despite the chaos. This way, dear. Quickly now. The older woman led her to the study, moved the bookshelf that hid the basement stairs, but instead of going down, she pressed a panel in the wall. A door swung open, revealing a reinforced room with steel walls and enough supplies for a siege. In you go, Mrs. Castellano said. Don't open this door for anyone except Mr. Virelli. Anyone else tries to get in, there's a gun in the top drawer and you use it. Understand? You're not coming? Someone needs to make sure the house doesn't burn down. Don't worry about me. I've survived worse than Victor Kozlov. Before Elena could argue, Mrs. Castellano pushed her inside and closed the door. Locks engaged with heavy metallic clicks. Elena was alone in the dark, the sounds of battle muffled but still audible through the thick walls. She found the gun Mrs. Castellano had mentioned, checked that it was loaded. Then she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and waited, and prayed to nothing in particular that the man who'd promised to come back to her would actually survive to keep that promise. The gunfire outside the safe room went on forever. Elena sat with her back pressed against cold steel, the gun in her lap, counting shots because it gave her something to focus on besides the fear clawing at her throat. 37, 42, 53. Then silence. The silence was worse than the noise. She waited, listening to her own heartbeat, to the muffled sounds of movement somewhere in the house. Footsteps on the floor above. Voices she couldn't make out. The crackle of something burning. She gripped the gun tighter, her finger resting near the trigger the way Adrian had shown her during one of their conversations about staying safe. Then someone tried the door handle. Elena stood up fast, raised the gun with shaking hands. I'm armed, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. If you're not Adrian Virelli, you need to leave. It's me, Adrian's voice rough and exhausted. Elena, it's me. Open up. She rushed to the door, fumbled with the locks, and yanked it open. Adrian stood on the other side, covered in soot and blood, his left arm hanging at an odd angle. But he was alive. He was standing. He was here. Elena threw herself at him, and he caught her with his good arm, held her tight despite the pain it must have caused. You came back, she said against his chest. I promised. Is it over? Yeah, it's over. Elena pulled back to look at him properly. His face was a mess, cuts, bruises, a burn across his cheekbone that would scar. His shoulder was bleeding again through the bandage, and his left arm definitely looked broken or dislocated. You need a hospital, she said. I need you to reset my shoulder first. Adrian? Hospital means questions. Police. Complications we don't need right now. Can you do it? Elena looked at his shoulder, assessed the angle. Dislocated, probably. She'd seen it before in the ER, helped with the reduction procedure a dozen times. But those patients had been sedated, had pain management, had proper equipment. It's going to hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. Just do it. She led him to the study, made him lie down on the floor. Found a belt for him to bite down on because she knew exactly how much this was going to hurt and didn't want him biting through his tongue. Then she positioned herself, grabbed his arm, and pulled. The sound of the joint popping back into place made her stomach turn. Adrian's entire body went rigid, the belt clenched between his teeth, a muffled sound of agony escaping despite his best efforts. Then it was done. his shoulder back where it belonged, swelling already starting. "Okay," Elena said, breathing hard. "Okay, that's done. Now we really need to get you cleaned up." She spent the next hour patching him up as best she could with the supplies in the house. The shoulder would need proper medical attention eventually, but for now it was stable. The cuts were superficial. The burn would heal. He'd survive. While she worked, Adrian told her what happened, how Kozlov's people had breached the west wall with explosives and poured in through the gap, how his men had held them off, room by room, until reinforcements arrived from his other properties, how they'd pushed Kozlov's forces back, captured 6 of them alive, killed twice that many, how Kozlov himself had been there, directing the assault from a distance, and how Carlo had put a bullet through his chest before the Russian could retreat. "He's dead?" Elena asked. "Yes." Carlo watched him fall, watched his people drag the body away. "It's done." "And Michael?" Adrian's expression darkened. "Gone. The tracker we implanted stopped transmitting 2 hours ago. Either he removed it or someone removed it for him." "You think Kozlov's people got to him?" "I think Michael made another stupid choice. But without Kozlov, whoever has him now doesn't have the resources to use him effectively. He's not our problem anymore." Elena should feel something about that. Relief, maybe? Or concern for the man she'd married. But there was still nothing. Michael had made his choices, and now he'd live or die with the consequences. She was done carrying his weight. "What happens now?" she asked, finishing the last bandage. "Now we rebuild, reinforce security. Make sure everyone knows what happens when you attack this family." Adrian caught her hand. "And we figure out what comes next for you." "What do you mean?" "I mean you're free now. Kozlov's dead. Michael's gone. There's no one trying to hurt you anymore. You can go back to your life. Your job. Your apartment. Everything you had before." The offer should have been exactly what Elena wanted. A return to normalcy. To safety. To the life she'd built before everything fell apart. But instead it felt like being told to step back into a cage she'd only just escaped. "And if I don't want to go back?" she asked quietly. Adrian's eyes searched her face. "Then you don't. But Elena, you need to understand what staying means. This world, my world, it doesn't get safer. There will always be another Kozlov, another threat, another war. That's the life I have. Is that really what you want?" "I don't know, but I know I don't want to go back to who I was before. The woman who waited in the rain, who fixed everyone else's problems and ignored her own, who made herself small because it was easier than taking up space. You were never small. You just couldn't see how much room you deserved to take up." Elena stood, paced to the window. Dawn was breaking over the damaged estate, revealing the full extent of the battle. Scorched walls, broken windows, bodies being covered with sheets. It should have horrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm, like she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life without knowing it. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I'm scared to leave, not because I don't have anywhere else to go, but because for the first time in years I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With a criminal who just killed a dozen people? With someone who sees me, who treats me like I matter, who doesn't expect me to be anything except exactly who I am." Adrian stood, moved to stand beside her despite the pain it clearly caused. "I can't promise you safety, can't promise you normal, can't even promise you tomorrow. I don't want promises. I want truth, and that's the one thing you've given me since the moment I climbed into that car." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite their roughness. "If you stay all the way. You become part of this, part of the family, part of the business. Not as someone we're protecting, but as someone who belongs here. Is that what you want?" Elena thought about it. Really thought about it. About the hospital and the life she'd built there. About the apartment that never felt like home. About Michael and 6 years of slowly drowning in someone else's choices. And then she thought about the last week, about feeling alive, about mattering, about finding strength she didn't know she had. "Yes," she said, "that's what I want." Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he kissed her, not gentle, not careful, but fierce, and claiming and full of something that felt like relief. Elena kissed him back, tasting blood and smoke and the promise of something she couldn't name yet but wanted desperately to explore. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Okay, then we do this right. No halfway. You're mine, I'm yours, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. That's very possessive. I know. Problem? Not even a little bit. The next few days were chaos. The police came asking questions about the explosions and the gunfire. Adrian's lawyers handled them with the kind of smooth efficiency that made it clear this wasn't their first time making problems disappear. The bodies were dealt with. The damage was repaired. And slowly, the estate transformed from a war zone back into a home. Elena called the hospital and quit her job. The supervisor sounded shocked. Elena Cross, reliable Elena, who never missed a shift and always volunteered for holidays, just walking away with 2 weeks' notice. But Elena didn't offer explanations, just said she was pursuing other opportunities and hung up before anyone could ask questions she didn't want to answer. She packed up her apartment, donated most of the furniture, kept only what mattered. A few books, some photos from before Michael, the watch her grandmother had given her before she died. Everything else she left behind, along with the woman who'd lived there. Adrian's people helped her move. Carlo, his leg healing but still limping, carried boxes and made jokes about her terrible taste in decorating. Dimitri assembled furniture without being asked. Mrs. Castellano clucked over everything and declared that Elena's room needed better curtains. Her room. Not a guest room. Not temporary housing. Her room. Her space. Her home. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. 2 weeks after the attack, Elena sat in Adrian's office while he worked, reading a book and drinking coffee. This had become their routine, existing in the same space without needing to fill it with conversation. Comfortable silence, the kind that only came when two people trusted each other enough not to perform. "I need to tell you something," Adrian said suddenly, looking up from his laptop. Elena set down her book. "Okay. We found Michael. Or rather, what's left of him." Elena's stomach dropped. "He's dead?" "Yes. Kozlov's people got to him before Kozlov died, probably assumed he'd be useful bargaining material. When that didn't work out, they killed him. Made it look like a suicide. Cops found him in a motel outside the city 3 days ago." Elena processed that. Michael was dead. The man she'd married, who'd destroyed their life together, who'd put her in danger, dead in a motel room. She waited for grief, for regret, for something other than this strange, distant numbness. "How do you feel about it?" Adrian asked carefully. "I don't know. Is that terrible? That I don't feel anything?" "No, it's honest." Adrian closed his laptop. "He hurt you, used you, nearly got you killed. You don't owe him your tears. I should feel something, though, shouldn't I? I spent 6 years with him, married him, built a life with him." "You built a life around him. There's a difference. And maybe the fact that you don't feel anything is your mind's way of protecting you, of acknowledging that you already grieved this relationship, already let it go." Elena thought about that, about all the nights she'd lain awake wondering where things went wrong, about the slow erosion of hope, about the moment in the basement when she'd looked at Michael and felt nothing but emptiness. Maybe Adrian was right. Maybe she'd been grieving for years without realizing it. "Do I need to do anything?" she asked. "For the funeral? For his family?" "His parents are handling it. You don't need to be involved if you don't want to be." "I don't." "That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it?" "It makes you someone who's choosing herself for once. There's nothing terrible about that." Elena stood up, moved to where Adrian sat, and wrapped her arms around him from behind. He leaned into her touch, his hand coming up to cover hers. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not judging me. For understanding. I'm the last person with any right to judge anyone." They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, until Mrs. Castellano knocked on the door and announced dinner. The household had grown in the past 2 weeks. More security, more staff, more people who needed feeding and organizing. Elena had started helping Mrs. Castellano with the logistics, discovering she had a knack for managing chaos that came from years of working in a hospital. Dinner was loud and crowded. Carlo told stories that were probably 70% fiction. Dimitri argued with another guard about soccer. Anna, the woman from the cabin, critiqued everyone's table manners. It felt like family. Dysfunctional, violent, complicated family, but family nonetheless. After dinner, Adrian pulled Elena aside. "Walk with me." They went out to the repaired gardens. The November air was cold, winter settling in early, but Elena didn't mind. She'd bought a proper coat with money Adrian insisted on giving her as salary for helping manage the household. She wasn't his charity case. She worked. She contributed. She earned her place here. I need to go to Chicago next week, Adrian said as they walked. Meeting with some associates, restructuring things now that Kozlov's gone. Could be dangerous, could be boring, hard to tell until we're there. Okay, I want you to come with me. Elena stopped walking. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending you're just someone I'm protecting. You're not. You're... He paused, choosing words carefully. You're important to me. More important than anyone's been in a long time. And I want people to know that, to see you standing beside me, not behind me. As what? Your girlfriend? Your partner? Both, either. Whatever you're comfortable with. Elena thought about what that meant. Being publicly attached to Adrian Varelli. Being visible in a world where visibility could be dangerous, but also being acknowledged, being seen, being chosen openly, not hidden away like a secret. Okay, she said, I'll come. Just like that? Just like that. But I need a dress. Something that says, don't mess with me or the man I'm with. Adrian laughed, rare and genuine. I think I can arrange that. The Chicago trip happened fast. They flew private, Elena's first time on anything other than a commercial flight. The luxury felt excessive until Adrian explained that commercial meant security risks they didn't need. The meeting was in a restaurant that closed to the public for the evening, filled with men in expensive suits who eyed Elena with open curiosity. Adrian introduced her as Elena Cross, not his assistant, not his companion, just her name, said with a weight that made it clear she mattered. The men's curiosity shifted to respect, or at least careful neutrality. The meeting itself was boring. Discussions of territories and percentages and agreements Elena didn't fully understand. She sat beside Adrian, sipped wine she barely touched, and watched. Saw how he negotiated, how he gave ground on small things to win on big ones, how he commanded respect without raising his voice or making threats. Afterwards, one of the men approached her, older, gray-haired, expensive watch. You're the nurse, he said. Was. Now I'm something else. Adrian's woman. Adrian's partner. There's a difference. The man smiled. Indeed there is. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him too. That's not something you hear often in this life. Usually it's all leverage and transaction. Refreshing to see something real. Elena didn't know what to say to that. The man nodded and walked away, leaving her with the strange realization that her relationship with Adrian was unusual even in this world. That what they had, messy and complicated and born from chaos, was somehow more authentic than the carefully arranged partnerships others in this business made. On the flight home, Adrian was quiet, staring out the window at the dark sky. You okay? Elena asked. Yeah, just thinking. About? About how different everything is now. 6 months ago, I would have handled Chicago alone, made deals without consulting anyone, come home to an empty house, and convinced myself I liked it that way. And now? Now I'm bringing you into meetings, introducing you as someone who matters, planning a future that includes another person for the first time in years. He turned to look at her. It's terrifying. For me too. But you're still here. But I'm still here. Adrian reached across the small space between their seats and took her hand. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night in the car. Maybe later. But I do. And I need you to know that. Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest. I love you too. Which is insane considering everything. But I do. Is it insane? Or is it just honest? Maybe both. They landed late, drove back to the estate in comfortable silence. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. Elena learned the business, not the violent parts, but the logistics. Managing properties, coordinating shipments, handling the legitimate enterprises that funded everything else. She was good at it, discovered she had a mind for organization that translated well from medicine to this new world. Adrian's people grew to respect her. Not because she was Adrian's woman, but because she earned it. She mediated disputes, solved problems, made decisions when Adrian wasn't available, and never second-guessed herself. She became indispensable in ways that had nothing to do with her relationship with Adrian and everything to do with her own competence. A year after that stormy night, Elena stood in the garden where she'd first admitted she wanted to stay. The estate was hosting some kind of gathering, associates from other cities, people whose names she now knew and whose respect she'd earned. She wore a dress that cost more than her old monthly rent, her hair styled by a professional, looking every inch like someone who belonged in this world. Adrian found her there, wrapped an arm around her waist. "You hiding? Taking a break? There's only so much small talk I can handle." "You're better at it than I am." "That's because you intimidate people by existing. I have to actually be charming." "You are charming, among other things." Elena leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd never been with Michael. "Do you ever regret it? That I stayed?" "Never. Do you?" "Not once. Well, maybe once. When Carlo tried to teach me to shoot and I nearly took his ear off." Adrian laughed. "He deserved it. He was being cocky." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the sounds of the party inside, but existing in their own small bubble of peace. Elena thought about the woman who'd climbed into the wrong car a year ago. Exhausted, lost, drowning in someone else's choices. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I've been thinking," Adrian said carefully, "about the future, about what comes next." "Okay. I want you to marry me." Elena pulled back to look at him. "Are you asking or telling?" "Both. Neither? I don't know. I'm terrible at this." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring, elegant, understated, perfect. "I want you to be my wife, not because you need my protection or my name, but because you're already my partner in everything that matters, and I want to make it official." Elena stared at the ring, her mind racing. Marriage. She'd been married before, and look how that ended. But this was different. Adrian was different. She was different. This wasn't about security or expectations or filling roles. This was about choice. "Yes," she said, "but only if we're clear about something." "What?" "I'm not giving up my last name. Cross stays. I worked too hard to build an identity here to just erase it." Adrian smiled, slipped the ring onto her finger. "Elena Cross Varelli." "Just Elena Cross. You're Adrian Varelli. We're partners, not a merger." "I can live with that." "Good. Then yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her there in the garden, and somewhere inside Elena felt the last piece of her old life finally let go. Michael was gone, buried, and forgotten. The job she'd outgrown was behind her. The woman who'd waited in the rain didn't exist anymore. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that power wasn't about control, it was about choice. That love wasn't about fixing someone or being fixed, it was about seeing and being seen. That home wasn't a place you were born into, but a space you built with people who valued you. The wedding happened quietly 3 months later. No big ceremony, no elaborate production, just Adrian, Elena, Mrs. Castellano as witness, and a judge who asked no questions about how a pediatric nurse ended up marrying someone with Adrian's reputation. Elena wore white because she wanted to, not because tradition demanded it. Adrian wore a suit that made him look dangerous and sophisticated in equal measure. Afterwards, they had dinner with the household. Carlo got drunk and made a speech about how Elena was the best thing that ever happened to Adrian, and how Adrian better not screw it up. Dimitri gave them a bottle of wine that was probably worth more than a car. Mrs. Castellano cried and pretended she wasn't. It felt perfect because it was real. Because it was them. 2 years after that, Elena sat in the same office where she'd spent so many afternoons reading while Adrian worked. But now she had her own desk, her own laptop, her own responsibilities. She was reviewing contracts for a new real estate acquisition when she felt the first real kick. She put a hand on her stomach, felt the baby, their baby, moving inside her. They'd found out she was pregnant 3 months ago, had spent the interim dealing with Adrian's panic and Elena's cautious excitement. He was terrified of being a father, of passing down the violence and damage of his world to someone innocent. She told him he didn't have a choice. The baby was coming, and he'd figure it out the same way he figured out everything else. "You okay?" Adrian asked from his desk. "Yeah, baby's kicking." He was beside her immediately, his hand replacing hers on her stomach. When he felt the movement, his entire expression softened into something Elena never got tired of seeing. Love and wonder and fear all mixed together. "That's our kid," he said, like he still couldn't quite believe it. "That's our kid. Are we ready for this?" "Probably not, but we'll figure it out." Adrian kissed her forehead, then her lips, then her stomach, where their daughter, they'd found out it was a girl last week, was growing. I love you. Both of you. So much it scares me. Love is supposed to be a little scary, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, and the future they were building. A future that included a daughter who'd grow up knowing she was wanted, who'd learn that women could be strong and soft simultaneously, who'd understand that family wasn't about blood, it was about choice. Elena thought about the night that changed everything. The rain, the wrong car, the man with a gunshot wound who'd looked at her like she mattered. If someone had told her then where she'd end up, married to a criminal, running an empire, pregnant with his child, she would have thought they were insane. But maybe insanity was just another word for brave, for choosing the uncertain over the safe, for building something new from the wreckage of something that never worked. 4 years after climbing into that car, Elena Virelli, she'd eventually taken the name for their daughter's sake, stood on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. Their daughter, Sophia, named after the woman Adrian had lost, was asleep inside. 2 years old, fearless, already showing signs of her father's intensity and her mother's determination. The estate had expanded. More properties, more businesses, more people who looked to Adrian and Elena for direction. They'd built something that mattered, not just an organization, but a family. People who looked out for each other, who valued loyalty over profit, who understood that power was only meaningful when it protected the vulnerable. Adrian joined her on the balcony, slipping an arm around her waist. He did that a lot now, touched her like he needed the reminder that she was real, that she'd stayed, that she chose him every day. What are you thinking about? He asked. That night, the storm, getting in the wrong car. Regrets? Not even one. You? I regret that you had to go through everything Michael put you through. I regret that you got hurt because of my world. But bringing you into my life? Never. That's the one thing I got right. Elena turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd shown her what it meant to be seen, to matter, to take up space without apology. I think we both got it right, she said. Eventually. Eventually, he agreed. Inside, Sophia started crying, not distressed, just awake and wanting attention. They went to her together, a united front the way they faced everything. Elena picked up their daughter, settled her on her hip, and watched Adrian make faces that made Sophia giggle. This was her life now. Not perfect, not safe, but real and honest and built on choices she made for herself. She wasn't the woman who waited in the rain anymore. She was someone who made people wait for her, who commanded respect, who'd learned that strength came not from fixing other people, but from knowing her own worth. And maybe that was the real story. Not about a woman who got saved, but about a woman who saved herself, who climbed into the wrong car and discovered it was exactly the right place to be, who learned that sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you. It strips away everything fake and shows you what you're actually made of. The woman who entered that car was broken and lost. The woman who stood here now was whole and found, not because someone fixed her, but because she finally had the space and courage to fix herself. The storm didn't ruin her life, it remade it. And in the remaking, she discovered something she'd spent 28 years looking for without knowing it. She discovered herself. And that made all the difference.